Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for coming tonight. My name is Chris Morin, and I serve on the Cape and Islands Enough Abuse campaign representing independent health. Enough Abuse campaign is sponsoring this tonight in acknowledgement of Child Sexual Abuse Prevention Month. We have a wonderful panel tonight representing those who serve children. Want to let everybody know that this will be recorded. If you do not want your visual, just turn off your video. We also ask that questions will be saved to the end, but please put them in the chat box. And Sue Whaley will be monitoring the chat box to bring those questions to the panelists at the end. Also, just want to say this subject in any form can be emotional and maybe triggering. So we want you to take care of yourselves. If you need to take a break, a stretch, go for water, whatever you need to do to take care of yourself. And so we welcome those who are participants and part of our audience. So I am going to turn this over to Beverly Costa Ciavola, another member of the Enough Abuse campaign.
Hi, everyone, and welcome. Thanks for joining us tonight. So I'm just going to give you a quick history of the Enough Abuse campaign and our start here in the Cape and Islands. So Mass Citizens for Children, or better known as Mass Kids, received a grant in 2003 from the CDC for child sexual abuse prevention. And it was actually the first ever child sexual abuse prevention grant of its kind. Mass children, Mass Kids, along with some other key informants, put together the proposal, and lo and behold, Massachusetts was able to get the grant. It was, I think, 1.7 million over 5 years or something of that nature. And so they started out doing 3 pilot sites. Originally, they had come to the Cape to ask if the Cape would be interested, but we weren't chosen in the end. But then a few years later, in 2012, Mass Kids came back and said, okay, we're now trying to create communities across the state that will address these issues and promote the Enough Abuse initiative, which consists of 6 curriculums that we're trained to provide in the community. There's also an online training for teachers. Chris is going to show you a little bit of the website at the very end. So now there are 9 communities in Massachusetts that are Enough Abuse community sites. But beyond that, this has also become a national and an international project. California, Maine, Maryland, Nevada, New Jersey, New York, South Dakota, and Sierra Leone all have Enough Abuse programs. They're using the curriculum. Some of them have it very widely distributed in all of their communities and schools. And so, you know, we strive here in Massachusetts to also do that. So in 2012, when we started the Enough Abuse campaign here, it was a joint partnership between Independence House and my organization, which is Cape Cod Neighborhood Support Coalition. And so the executive director of Mass Kids, Jetta Bernier, came down. She trained about, I don't know, 10 of us in the curriculum so that we could start, you know, offering those trainings into the community. And so it's been a slow process, but we have stuck with it. We're very committed to working in this realm of prevention for child sexual abuse. And we're very grateful for all of our partners here on the Cape and Islands that help us do that. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Michael Medeiros, who's also one of our members of the planning committee for the Enough Abuse campaign, and also one of the original members, along with myself. And Stu, I think you were an original member. And so Michael's going to introduce himself and introduce the panel.
Your special pizza.
Thank you, Beverly. And thank you to all of you who have joined us this evening. I'd like to take a moment to introduce our panelists. Tonight joining us, we have on our panel Carol Biondi from Cape Cod Children's Place, along with Jacob Stapleton from Children's Cove, Jean Calvert from the Massachusetts Department of Mental Health, and Danny Palat from Independence House. And I'm going to be serving kind of as the facilitator or moderator, if you will. And so I'm going to be directing questions to our different panelists. And then at the end, you all, they have joined us, you'll have the opportunity to put questions into the chat. Sue Whaley is going to be monitoring the chat, so feel free at any time if you would like to add a question or a comment to the chat. We're going to be paying attention to that as well. I would ask you all to keep your microphones on mute just for the duration so that we don't have any background static or audio interference with our panelists. And we're going to start with introductions. Just to get a sense of who's who on our panel and the work that's being done in the community around the prevention and addressing issues around child sexual abuse. So I'd like to start, if we could, with you, Carol, if you would just take a moment and introduce yourself and share a little bit about the work that you do.
Sure. My name is Carol Biondi, and I was hired in January 2020 by Cape Cod Children's Place to be one of the 4 members of a grant that we received from Children's Trust to be a pilot program for the state of Massachusetts called Safe Child Communities. And it's an initiative that we hope spreads across the state. And we've always, Cape Cod Children's Place has been around for quite a long time, embedded in the community, doing a lot of building of resilient families in a variety of ways. So we are an early education school, but we also have a lot of programs for parents and children. We have parent education programs, parent support programs, and we were selected by the Children's Trust to look at how we can build a collaborative, coordinated effort to really vaccinate the communities for child abuse prevention by using the 5 protective factors. And I'll go into that a little bit more later.
Excellent. Thank you, Carol. And I'm going to switch over to Jacob Stapleton from Children's Cove. Good evening, Jacob.
Good evening, Michael. Thank you for having me. Good evening, everyone. I'm Jacob Stapleton. I'm the Community Engagement and Education Coordinator at Children's Cove. We are the Child Advocacy Center for Cape Cod, Martha's Vineyard, and Nantucket. We are a department of Barnstable County government, so we're a standalone department. And we work collaboratively with all departments of law enforcement across the Cape and both islands, as well as the Child Protection Agency for Massachusetts, the Department of Children and Families, as well as the Cape and Islands District Attorney's Office, the Department of Public Health, and numerous community partners and providers for the comprehensive response to cases involving crimes against children. And particularly, we respond to cases involving child sexual abuse, severe physical abuse, witness to domestic violence, as well as commercial sexual exploitation of children, otherwise known as human trafficking or the online sexual exploitation of children. We've been around since 1997, and we've been coordinating this response to provide a best practice approach to child abuse intervention. Anytime there is a case involving one of those particular crimes against children that has made its way to law enforcement, the Department of Children and Families, the emergency room, or other investigative agency, they will contact and collaborate with us so that we can provide a streamlined, child-friendly, trauma-informed intervention to get all of the information needed for an investigation and then coordinate the best practice response for that child. So we have specially trained forensic interviewers who conduct the interview with the child between 0 and 17 to get all of the information needed maximizing that information for investigators, minimizing the trauma to the child, and getting a streamlined document for that investigation. We then coordinate community-based supports and services, trauma-informed mental health referrals to the community, as well as medical services. In my particular role, I do community engagement, education, outreach. I provide training to any child serving professional across the Cape and Islands on how to recognize and respond to abuse. And we also provide prevention education in partnership with other organizations, including as a Safe Communities partner with Cape Cod Children's Place.
Excellent. Thank you, Jacob.
Thank you.
Over to Jean Calvert with the Department of Mental Health. Hi, Jean.
Hi, Mike. Thank you for having me, and welcome everybody. So I do work for the Department of Mental Health. We are an agency that services people from 0 to whatever. We provide services for children and families, certainly support the children who have come forward, who have been the victims of childhood sexual abuse, and their families, because we have to keep in mind that part of caring for these kids is supporting their families. And we have a whole host of services from, the partial hospital program, which is what I oversee. We certainly have a large number of our folks that we work with in partial who are still dealing with symptoms, related to their childhood sexual abuse trauma. And so we have services for kids and adults. I also have a private practice. I'm a trauma certified CBT clinician. And so I work with a lot of kids and families in the community who are survivors of childhood sexual abuse trauma and help them to move on with their lives and to heal. I was the representative of DMH with the folks at Children's Cove. I've worked a lot with crisis teams and things like that to provide some, brief interventions for kids and families who are just getting started on their journey of recovery. And I'm happy to be here tonight.
Thank you, Jean. And last but not least, we have Danielle Pilat from Independence House. Hi, Danielle.
Hi. So my name is Danielle Pilat. I also go by Danny for short. I am a counselor at Independence House. I work with children, teens, and adults. So I work through all the lifespans. I work for Independence House, which has been around for 40 years, and we provide free and confidential specialized services for children ages 5 and up, teens, adults, and also for later in life community who are survivors of domestic and sexual violence. So we have a lot of different programs where also the rape crisis, we do a lot of the MPAs and rape crisis in the hospitals for sexual assault victims. We do get a lot of referrals as well from Children's Cove for many of our children who are sexual assault survivors. Lots of other communities also refer to us for domestic violence for kids. We have teens and prevention programs, also outreach and education for children and teens. And we also do a lot of safe plan and court advocacy. We have stable housing stabilization programs, and we do work as well with homicide survivors when we get them in. And we also have some legal advocacy programs as well. So I'm excited to be here and join in this panel tonight.
Excellent. Thank you and welcome. We are so fortunate to have such a group of skilled, seasoned professionals working passionately in the field, caring individuals who have given their time to be with us tonight. And I'm just going to jump right in and start with the first question, which I'm going to direct to Jacob to start us off. So many people are in denial here on Cape Cod. I mean, we live in a resort community about the nature of child sexual abuse or the prevalence of sexual abuse on the Cape. And I'm just wondering, how do we address this concern? How do we respond to that? You know, it doesn't happen here.
Yeah, I think that that's a fantastic question, and it's a great way to start, because we have to look at child sexual abuse for what it actually is, and it's a public health crisis. When we look statistically at the numbers in the United States, 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys will be sexually abused in some way before their 18th birthday. And so when we look at that from the context of a public health crisis, that is more girls who will be impacted by child sexual abuse and sexual assault than women who will be diagnosed with breast cancer in their lifetime. And that's more boys who will be impacted by child sexual abuse than men who will be diagnosed with prostate cancer in their lifetime. And so when we look at that in the terms of the sheer numbers, it's catastrophic. And more than that, child sexual abuse is not affecting only a certain community. It affects all communities. It affects males, identified individuals, female identified individuals, the trans community, all of the LGBTQ community, wealthy families, poor families, of all races and backgrounds. And so regardless of where we are in the United States, child sexual abuse is rightfully a public health crisis. And so as the organization that receives the referrals for these cases, when they've been reported on the Cape and Islands, we know that these cases are happening here. On average, we see about 150 to 200 cases each year. And while we look at those numbers potentially comparatively with other counties in Massachusetts, we are kind of on the lower end of that. However, we have to take into account a couple of factors. First and foremost, only 1 in 10 child sexual abuse survivors will ever disclose their abuse in their lifetime. So the vast majority of the time, individuals who have experienced child sexual abuse never disclose, they never seek the help that they are entitled to and deserve because of the stigma of talking about child sexual abuse. And then the second point is when we look at the population of children, we're actually one of the lowest in the Commonwealth. And so while we do have a lower population per capita of children in the area, proportionately, we are still on average with other counties in the state with the rates in which child sexual abuse is reported. And what we do know is it's tremendously underreported. So it doesn't matter that we are living in this beautiful area. I'm a Cape Codder, and I grew up here. But we do have our share of issues and concerns, and this is definitely one of them.
Thank you. I'm going to move now to Carol. What are some challenging behaviors that you see in some of the children that you're working with through Cape Cod Children's Place?
So not only do we have children in-house who are part of our early education and care program, but we also have our First Steps Together program, which is a home visiting program for people who've had substance abuse issues in the past or are recovering. And we've got a lot of different groups that support families to create a safe environment to come together and just share with professionals like our occupational therapist, Melissa Alves, and Jennifer Watson, our speech language pathologist, and some folks who are running our evidence-based parenting education programs, the Nurturing Fathers program. We've got a wonderful support group with Paul Melville for Dad's Talk, and we provide a safe space. We've just partnered with the health ministries. So we also have safety conversations that Jacob is a part of that is going into the health ministry, where it is a safe space for them to just begin to open the dialogue, to just have a safety conversation. And we've been so impressed with how the conversation to get educated on this issue brings forward an opportunity for the families to begin telling their story, to have a safe place to go. So we create a safe space. We don't have clinicians on our team, but there are a lot of challenging behaviors that these families see within their own households. Not only have they dealt with COVID and trying to work remotely and all the other challenges, but the behaviors we speak of as a language that child is using to express that there's a need. And so part of our program is based, and I'm seeing an internet, sorry if I'm flipping out a little bit.
It's a little bit coming in and out a little bit.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. We are at the mercy of the internet gods, as it were. I think we all understand.
So this is a creating a safe space for families to discuss challenging behaviors within their household is what we can offer. And then we do a lot of referring to our partners, agencies that are focused on the behaviors and issues that come up that might alert a leader that there's a concern. Everyone's trained, everyone knows how to refer, and created another called Find Help, where families can go for resources. We're all about giving families our guides of resources that they can reach out to discuss things that are appropriate in appropriate venues. Clinicians, agencies like the Cove, the Enough Abuse campaign, they're all wonderful opportunities for families to become educated and get some knowledge about what those behaviors they're noticing in their child might be telling them so that they can get the help that they need.
That's so true. All behavior is communication, for sure. Thank you, Carol. And speaking of having difficult conversations or how to begin having those conversations, if I could go over to Jean, what age do you think is really appropriate for a parent or a family member to begin talking with children about safety?
I mean, there's really no perfect age, right, for having these conversations with our kids. They should be part of the same conversations that we have about stranger danger, everyday safety things, because what we really want to do is create an environment of trust and let kids know that it's okay to talk about these things. You really want to talk with kids about what areas of the body are considered private and let them know that they have a right to say no. You really want to foster the environment where they understand that there are normal touches and then there are touches that are not acceptable, right? When you go to a doctor for an exam or when a caregiver is bathing you or helping you with toileting versus a touch that might feel uncomfortable or be inappropriate. And these should always be an ongoing dialogue throughout the lifespan with our children, right? As they grow and as they're able to communicate and have these kind of conversations. The most important things is to let them know that this is their body. It's not okay for anybody to touch their body without their permission, even other kids, right? That's not okay. Let them know that if someone touches them in a way that doesn't feel okay, that they have somebody, a trusted adult that they can go to and that they can share that information with, right? It's about creating this kind of environment and having these ongoing conversations with them about being safe in all ways, right? Our bodies are one ways of keeping ourselves safe. And that's the most important thing that we need to teach our kids. And again, just keep that dialogue open for them.
Thank you, Jean. I think it's probably an area that many parents struggle with and may feel, uncomfortable or not prepared to be able to begin having those difficult conversations that can be very sensitive, particularly if one has been a survivor of sexual abuse themselves. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I just wonder, how do parents begin to have that conversation? Or Danielle, what would you say to a parent who is struggling to begin those conversations?
Can I just add, Mike, that Children's Cove, and Jacob might want to speak to this, and 8 Cousins have a partnership. There's some really great books out there for parents and kids, how to start this dialogue, because it is uncomfortable for some parents to have these conversations. And if we can sort of help normalize that, sexual safety and body safety is the same as any other kind of safety, just so that we have that environment where it's okay to have those conversations.
Yeah, I'll jump in and talk about that after you, Danny.
I totally agree with that. I actually had pulled out 2 books that I usually use with young children that I said, no, you can talk a lot about body safety a little bit more with kids and kind of how do they keep themselves safe and out of harm's way from adults and other people. And also, like this book, Our Very Special Bodies, also talks a lot about body safety. So I think there's definitely a lot of curriculum out there and different books out there that can be really helpful. And honestly, these kids at this age, these young children, they can identify body parts and they can discuss body safety. You can discuss these things in a way with them that they understand. And I always say it's really important to use whatever language it is that they are using for their body parts, especially when discussing what we would consider their sex organs and or private parts of their body. You can even use terms such as this is good touch versus bad touch, or like red flag touches versus green flag touches, and really helping children to identify what those private areas of the body are underneath where they would typically wear a bathing suit is usually the best way to kind of talk to very young children. And I would say, I've had conversations with kids and talking about consent and body safety 5 and up. And honestly, I've had some really great relationships with those children and talking about those really important things. So those are definitely the languages that I would use. You can even use consent and teach consent just in simple ways of what it means to say that what is consent, and like is something as simple as a hug, right? You can give consent to give a hug or receive a hug, and you also it is okay to say no for those children if it's something that's making them feel really upset, uncomfortable, any different feelings, maybe in danger. And also really teaching some healthy boundaries in that way. And identifying those safe parents, caregivers, teachers, coaches, and doctors who they can go to if these boundaries are disrespected by either another child or another adult, and just really identifying who it is they can go to and speak to about those things. Very important for young kids.
Thanks, Danielle. Yeah, I know that with the Enough Abuse campaign and some of the different curricula, we put an emphasis on using correct terminology for body parts with even children from a young age. And that, building that sense of confidence that there's nothing wrong with talking about our body parts, just like you would talk about your nose or your ear. And just, it's really empowering to children to, know that this is their body and that they do have a say over how comfortable they're feeling with different people, different touch. But I want to go back to Jacob. Go ahead.
Yeah, and so just echoing off of that point, a big piece of it is engaging in these conversations in a way where we're not making them uncomfortable. And a lot of the times the reasons why they are uncomfortable for parents is for some of the reasons that we talked about earlier, is that either these types of conversations weren't role modeled to us as children by our parents. And so we're kind of starting out like, I don't know where to begin with this one. And so you have to kind of take that step. But remembering also that as adults, we have too much knowledge. We know too much about this type of content, and we're bringing it to a place way beyond the scope and understanding of children. So when we're thinking of body safety in our minds, we're thinking about, okay, body safety, unsafe touches, sexual abuse, and then we go down that rabbit hole where for a child, things are much easier. And so if we can explain things in the way that we would want to as a child, you can say these things simply. At times that make sense. So when you are getting a child, even a very young child, 2 years old, you're getting them dressed, you're helping them get ready in the morning. Hey, the parts of your body that are covered by your underwear here or covered by a bathing suit, those are private and nobody should be touching those or asking to touch those or see those at any time, unless it's your parent, caregiver, whoever it is helping you get dressed. And nobody should be asking you to look at or touch their private parts in their body. It's a simple statement. It doesn't need to be a sit-down conversation. Just making those types of statements where it makes sense. Getting dressed, bath time, going swimming. Finding the context in everyday experiences to give a reminder, just like we would with, hey, the stove is really hot. Please don't put your hands up here. You know, oh, I have knives out. Please don't run because I'm cooking, right? It's the same types of reminders, but doing that about body safety. And to Danny's point, you know, talking about that body autonomy. You know, I'll give you a personal example is, you know, I have two daughters, they're 5 years old. And when one of my daughters was really young, she did not like kisses, hated them. And so I would go over to give her a kiss and say, I don't want a kiss. And in my mind, I'm like, I am rejected. I am dad and I am rejected, right? But what I said was, okay, honey, no problem. I understand that. I respect that, right? Reinforcing that body autonomy. I don't want a hug. Okay, no problem. And not having, and as a parent, as an adult, if you're seeing somebody trying to push that, say, no, no, no. They said no. Please respect their private, you know, space and their boundaries. You know, and to Jean's point, we worked with 8 Cousins Bookshop in Falmouth to really find a list of books that kind of address these issues on the periphery so that parents could start there without having to go right in for the super uncomfortable stuff. So I'll give you an example of one of those books. Is actually called Don't Touch My Hair by Cherie Miller, which really touches on so many incredible points, but it's about a young Black girl who, you know, has very curly Afro hair and, you know, she loves it, but the story goes through about how so many people are trying to touch her hair. And the kind of moral of the story and the message of the story is, you know, you can tell someone, no, I don't want that. It's really talking about body autonomy. And that's a really great way to read the story, because it's a story and kids love stories, and then say, so what are some of the lessons you got from that? You know, and is there anything that are there times where maybe people are trying to touch you or hug you and you don't want them to? Tell me about that. Well, here's some ways that you can say, I don't want that. Oh, and if somebody does try to touch your hair, touch your body, touch your face, give you a hug, and you say no and they do it anyways, what should you do? Right? And role modeling and that, talking through that. So, so those are definitely ways to really break the ice without going right into child sexual abuse, sexual assault, all of that.
That's really helpful. Thank you. Can I go to Carol and ask, so all of your agencies, you know, represented here are mainly focused on protecting children and providing them with services, you know, and resources. What steps would you say that your agency is taking towards prevention of child sexual abuse?
Well, I'd really like to say a big thank you to Children's Trust for actually making all of our programs no cost for everybody. We've broken down that barrier. We don't ask for income eligibility or anything. It doesn't matter. So we've leveled that playing field where your economic status isn't going to deter you from being involved in anything we do. You know, the Cape Cod Children's Place was selected by Children's Trust in 2020. So that was March, our kickoff happened. And then suddenly, you know, what happened after that, we had to figure out how to keep our programs and the initiative of Stop Abuse for Every Child, which is called the Safe Child Communities Initiative, going. And we have been amazed at how the need is identified by the numbers of families who come to our services. We continued on with Zoom. Our home visiting program continued in a different format, and we had to pivot. But, you know, Senator Peake said, why should we focus on preventing abuse? You know, we've shifted the focus to prevention because the cost of abuse and neglect to the Commonwealth is huge, and to our local communities and families. And why do healthy, stable families matter? Well, Senator Peake is totally in support of this program because healthy, stable families equals healthy, stable communities and the Commonwealth in general. So we're hoping that this initiative can show evidence that when families learn the tools with evidence-based, well-researched interventions from us, where we can teach parents the skill sets of how to positively discipline, of how to give them nurturing fathering skills, nurturing parenting skills, And Cindy's Horgan's Raising Healthy Families program, which is all evidence informed, that's often the gateway where families come to our other services. So they're referred by the courts, by probation, they're referred by DCF. And once they become confident in the practicing of the skill sets and getting that certificate of completion, which is a sense of pride for them, they then learn about all of our other programs that we run. So we have parent support groups. We've got a home visiting program that Children's Trust is looking to expand for us. We have our Parent Child Plus program where we go in and give them books and give them a toy each week and educate and teach and model all of these interactions and how to respond to a child who's potentially showing a challenging behavior. And we practice through our positive discipline 6-week programs that we offer families in Spanish and in English. And soon in the fall, we've trained somebody through DCF to do it in Portuguese. So we've broken through the language barrier. We're training and giving professional development to our providers. And the Safe Child Communities initiative is all about partnering with our agencies and organizations. So we just met with 16 of us, all working and doing the work of prevention in our own ways to collaborate and coordinate and make a coordinated effort. So again, we look at the 5 protective factors that are 30 years of evidence that Children's Trust sees, is that if we give parents, the 5 protective parents are parental resilience, giving them the tools to learn how to bounce back from adverse situations and how to manage stress. So we've partnered with Calmer Choice to do some mindfulness programs with our families to teach them how to calm and emotionally regulate themselves, understanding how the brain works in that way so that they can self-soothe first, take that deep breath and pause, and then co-regulate hopefully with their child to teach them language around emotions and how to create an environment in their house where the child can go and calm themselves down and then come back when everybody's in a safe place to discuss and create solutions for ways to respond and react as a family. The other protective factor is social connections. So we offer families a place to come at our playgrounds, at our Audubon societies, at our venues, the Cape Cod Rep Theater, offering tickets for families to come to events for free, where they can see puppet shows and opportunities to just be a part of the community. And once parents have tools to be out in the community and know that their child isn't going to create a fuss or a behavior because now they know how to respond and react appropriately, they're much more apt to come to our parent-child activities. We have 40 of them every single quarter that we offer families for free to come out and go to the libraries and teach them how to get a library card and engage in the activities that are going on right under their noses sometimes that they've never even walked in the door with. We have little artist programs to generate creativity and curiosity. And the other most important part of the protective factor too is offering them concrete supports. We have sent so many diapers and gift cards, stop and shop cards to make sure that they're linked to the food that they need, access to services by giving them a simple referral to make a phone call or doing it with them. We have a clothing swap twice a year, and that's about to happen again in May. So the basic needs of housing, clothing, food, the diapers that they need, we offer for free. And then there's the social emotional competence of children that we attend to. So schools have a social emotional component now in their curriculums, and we interact in an empathetic way and model that and teach parents the important cornerstone of teaching their child how to be empathetic and interact with others in a positive way. through our playgroup leaders who are all trained to model that in our playgroups. So those are some of the things that we're doing. The Safe Child Communities Initiative, we hope will spread across the state because we are gathering in a database the evidence of how well our families are connecting in with what they're learning, and then how often they're coming back to receive more services in the community with our partners. So we're excited about how this has started.
That's great. And even though here on the Cape, Cape Cod Children's Place is based, is it in Eastham?
Well, the site is in Eastham, but our services are from Barnstable to Provincetown. So
Okay,
we're
so it's
in
a
the
wide
recreation
area.
departments. Yes, we're everywhere, outdoors, indoors, and bringing families to where their community sites are.
That's great. It sounds like you're building a lot of protective factors, which is wonderful. So if I can go back to Jacob Stapleton from Children's Cove, when it comes to abusers, you know, those who would become perpetrators of abuse, we know that there's no one profile, you know, there's no like physical characteristics. So how would someone be able to recognize someone who might pose a risk or be a danger to their children?
Yeah, that's a great question, because it's, you know, I think when we're trying to think about prevention, you know, we want to have that answer, right? Who is that person? Who is that concerning individual? So I think some of those myths that we have to break is the fact that people seem to think that the only people who abuse children are strangers. They're the unknown. They're the scary dude in the trench coat with the van. And while those people exist, the vast majority of the time, it's not that person. 90% of perpetrators of child sexual abuse are somebody that is known to the child and is trusted by the child. And if it's not a family member, of which 30 to 40% of the time it is on average, it's going to be somebody that the family also knows and trusts. So it's going to be a family member, a teacher, a babysitter, a member of the faith community, a camp counselor, a coach, somebody who has that connection. And so there are a few common factors that you'll see among perpetrators of child sexual abuse, is that they are in positions of trust or authority or power. So they have some type of role with that child or within the family system. And so because they have that trust, there's going to be that possibility, there's going to be no, that couldn't possibly be a concern that we have to have. And so, you know, it's hard, because on one hand, you want to say, don't be paranoid, don't think everybody's going to abuse your kids, because again, it doesn't happen like that. And at the same time, this is where those conversations with children are so tremendously important, because you know, it's going to be that person that is going to try to approach. And so some of the things to specifically pay attention to are individuals who are trying to spend an unusual amount of time with children outside of their professional capacity, right? So if somebody is say they work with children throughout the day, and then they volunteer with children in the evening, and then they volunteer with children over the weekend. Yes, there's a high likelihood that maybe they just are really passionate about working with kids, but that is kind of something where, you know, do you have a social life with adults? Who are those people in your life? If they're also trying to spend time with children unmonitored, when there are children that are unaccompanied by other adults, you know, oh, I can bring your child or these children to this event. I can give them a ride in my car. I can do this, I can do that. They're always going to be ready, willing, and able, and overly helpful. And because they have created that atmosphere of trust with children, they've created an atmosphere of trust with parents as well. We talk a lot, and there's a lot of vernacular related to grooming, right? It's building levels of trust and comfort with children. The first place that is actually manipulated is the trust of the parents and grooming of the environment. It's creating a situation where they are unquestionable, that they are trustworthy in any space that they could be. And so if there is an individual who's trying really hard to do that and then trying to find those unaccompanied, unmonitored times with children, when it doesn't seem like it would be normally appropriate or happen usually, that's definitely a concerning or a red flag. This can often happen, unfortunately, when there are circumstances at home with children that are challenging, which is why these conversations around protective factors are so important. Is, if a parent or a family system is going through financial troubles, both parents are working an exorbitant amount of jobs and hours, housing instability, divorce, other types of issues that cause destabilization in the home that reduce the kind of the red flags and the radar for parents. Those are the things that perpetrators and predators look for, is those opportunities to be that extra helpful person in just this one place. So because I could go on for a while about this, and I don't want everybody to be completely paranoid of everything. But one of the things too that is a common theme is that 90% of perpetrators approximately are men. And I think that we do have to acknowledge that. We have to put that out there, is that 90% of the time perpetrators are men. There are female perpetrators. That is also something that we do need to talk about. The kind of profile of female perpetrators is a little different, but it does follow some of those same categories. But there is that element there too. And these aren't rough, violent relationships. These are relationships built on trust. And so this is where that element of prevention and conversation with kids and ensuring that you as the parent are a trusted person to be able to come and talk to you about uncomfortable things is important. But also, and we're kind of going backwards again, talking about that element of prevention and have those conversations with kids, is who are the other adults in children's lives that they trust. And so we'll often do an exercise with parents and with kids is, who are 3 trusted adults you have in your life that aren't your family, right? Because we want to know who those folks are. So as a parent, right, if my daughter had something happening, but she was scared to come to me, right, because she knows I'm going to lose my mind and I'm going to go after that person, right? So she doesn't want to deal with daddy's reaction. Who's another adult that she may go to say, I'm kind of in a situation, I'm in some trouble and I need some help. And, can I talk to you about it? We want to know who those folks are. And you as their parent want to know who that is as well, or caregiver, because then that way you'll know who they are. You can introduce themselves and you can be acquainted with that individual, because it may be a teacher that they have a really good relationship with. It may be a guidance counselor, it may be a coach. There may be nothing wrong with that individual, in which terms you have an ally with protecting your child. And if they are somebody who could mean to manipulate that trust, by getting to know them, you're letting them know I'm an involved parent and we talk. And that's another protective element that you can have. So.
That's great. This is very useful information as we're thinking about how to create environments where all of our children and youth are going to be safe, and building in these protective factors. Anyone else on the panel care to add to what Jacob was just talking about in terms of characteristics of a perpetrator, or warning signs, indicators, things to look out for?
I think one of the things that we teach our playgroup leaders is that people tend to hang around a playground. It's common that people who are out there looking for children show up where children are hanging out. And so one of our most popular programs are our playground facilities. We go on purpose to the communities across the all of Cape Cod, from Provincetown down to Barnstable, because the Massachusetts Department of Early Education and Care has us as the lead agency for a coordinated family and community engagement project that we must be in order to be a Safe Child Communities initiative. So that allows us to have a variety of places where we gather, and our playgroup leaders are on the lookout for a potential person that shows up every week, so that they know to contact our administrator, Cindy Horgan, and go through the steps of just potentially reporting somebody who's lingering like that. And as parents, we teach them the same thing, to just notice and use something like Family Watchdog to show evidence that you can, and see who's in your neighborhood that is somebody who has been convicted. So you see a face, you see who's in your neighborhood, and know the address of that person. So there are things like that that families can be guided towards.
Yeah, and another thing that we emphasize in the Enough Abuse curriculum is like that gut feeling. You know, like if you get that just unsettled vibe that like, ooh, this person just kind of, you know, I can't put my finger on it, but there's just something about this person that is like setting off my, you know, senses, to pay attention to that and to not ignore that, but to give that attention, and to like consciously make a note of that and not dismiss it. Jean, you were going to add.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Well, I just wanted, you had mentioned about changes in behavior, right? And so, you know, if you're noticing regressive behaviors in your kids, maybe they're sucking their thumb again, maybe they're having nightmares, maybe they're starting to isolate, you might see changes in their hygiene or in time spent with friends and things like that. That's something to take note of too, and include those in your conversations with your kids. You know, I noticed that you're having a hard time sleeping. Like, what's going on? Is there, create that environment where they can share that with you, and pay attention to those kinds of changes. Older kids, we might see, some higher risk behaviors. We might see overly sexualized behaviors, sexualized comments, even in little guys. Sometimes we see that. We might see their grades drop. We might see them start to pull away from their friends, things like that. And again, older kids, we see a significant increase in the use of substance abuse amongst survivors of sexual abuse. So something else to take note of as well. So that, pay attention to when you see these changes. And it can be difficult, as Jacob said, these perpetrators, they're really good at targeting kids from families who, are struggling in other areas, right? And so paying attention to just those kinds of things, really important. I think it's also important to mention how courageous it is for these kids to speak up. Again, because these are people who are often in positions of trust, positions of authority, that families know and that kids know. And, how do you report to your grown-up that, your coach is touching you in ways that are inappropriate? It can be very, very difficult for these kids. And it can also create a crisis once this disclosure is made. And so just keep in mind that some of the basic things that, that families have to deal with, like, how do I take care of my other kids while we're doing this? And what do I say to my employer when I have to take time off to support my child and, and get through the SANE interview and things like that, to just be mindful about those kinds of things as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Jean. You're talking about like some of the behaviors and like the warning signs and indicators of, that might mean that a child may have experienced abuse, and like what to look out for. And I wonder, for parents, how do we distinguish between what may just be typical, age appropriate, developmentally anticipated behavior, that may have like a sexual look to it, versus when does it become problematic or start to be like, oh, that should set off a flag?
Yeah, we at the Cape Cod Children's Place have found funding to hire staff. Melissa Alves, who is a pediatric occupational therapist, to do consults with families to just get professional eye from the angle. Maybe they're showing behaviors in a play group she comes to our play groups and just observes, just as an observer, as a visitor, to help guide the families to potentially have a free consult with her, to just do a professional type assessment, not a complete assessment, but she has an eye for knowing those type of differentiations and will guide the families to an agency like Jake's. I mean, the Children's Cove is the agency who can do these types of interviews in a way is trained. But the behaviors, again, a parent might say, they can see while their child is engaging in a play group that the child is acting differently than the others, and they sometimes just stop coming, and we don't want that to happen. We want to give the parents the skills to know that they can be the child's best advocate, find out if they have a gut feeling that something's wrong, where can they go for help? So we become that trusted resource to help guide them to the appropriate referrals.
Thank you, Carol. Yes.
Yeah, and just to add in, and along with Carol as well, is, I think that's again taking into context of what we know as adults versus the behavior of children. And so it can be very concerning and very quickly concerning when we see that very young children are engaging in some type of what could be considered sexual exploration and play, right? 3, 4, 5, 6, and maybe a little older than that. And really, when we're looking at younger children like that, 3, 4, 5, and 6, is there's a natural curiosity that children have about everything, about the world around them, about how things work. Even younger than that, children under 3, they're trying to figure it all out. They're learning how to walk and eat and talk and play and engage. And I remember when my children, they were infants or toddlers, and they were like, "Oh, I got this head on top of up here, and it does this thing." And so they'll touch and feel different parts of their body. They recognize that maybe there's different parts of their bodies that feel good. And so they might touch those. And so as parents, having those conversations about privacy and what you do in private, what you don't, do as a regular thing. Those are normal conversations to have with young children. Younger children, they like to be naked. They like to be free. They like to be who they are. They don't recognize some of that stuff about privacy. Where maybe someone's wearing a dress or they're wearing shorts. How are you sitting so that you're not showing off the private parts of your body and redirecting? Kids wanting to know what, this is what my body looks like. What does your body look like? That those things are normal, appropriate developmental behaviors for children. When behavior starts to seem past and older, when they're mimicking sexualized behavior or physically violent behavior, if they're engaging in types of kissing or touching or fondling that is beyond their age, and when redirected, they either don't have an answer to it or they continue to engage in that behavior. A lot of the times when kids are doing something that from a societal or cultural standpoint is outside of the norm, if they're redirected, they will respond to that redirection. And so if there's a continuously engaging behavior around that, that's where there's those concerns. And so that's where, having individuals that work in occupational therapy and kind of see the behavior, that's where that's helpful. And contacting us at Children's Cove, our mental health coordinator, Christine Montero, has been a part of a larger statewide initiative and a lot of training related to problematic sexual behavior in children, where we've been trying to provide a lot of training for our mental health partners across the Cape and Islands, including training for teams at Independence House and Cape Cod Children's Place on how to recognize and really how to work with kids around that and making those specialized referrals. So, when in doubt, as a parent, as a community member, ask for support. I think that it's an okay question that helps us also break the stigma of talking about child sexual abuse, about talking about these kinds of things. Because if we're too scared to ask the professionals, then we might be asking too late. And so it's really important to engage in that conversation.
Thank you, Jacob. Danielle, I feel like I've kind of neglected you a little bit. I want to get back to you and see if there's anything else that you would like to add about any of the myriad of things that we've been having in this conversation, the different topics, and maybe something that struck a chord or resonated with you that you'd like to add on to or respond to.
Well, I definitely think there's definitely a lot of just talking about this last few little bit, just thinking about different challenging behaviors that we might see in the children that we work with are just so many different things that we do see. It ranges from, developmental impacts on children to social, emotional, and cognitive impairments. There might be inabilities for them to kind of form those healthy peer relationships. I've also seen some children and mainly teens having kind of difficulties with those gender identities. And also a lot of those regressive behaviors or kind of like when they do play, kind of bringing that into play, right? Those behaviors that are maybe going on outside of the play. And self-harm behaviors are another big thing. I've also seen a lot more suicidality and suicidal thoughts of even young children, which is something definitely getting more seen, I think, with younger kids. And then just those adoption of unhealthy or high-risk behaviors, either as young kids or as they get older. And also just a lot of mental health issues, physical health issues, and even those problematic sexualized behaviors are another big thing that you do see a lot working with these kids. And then you also have a lot of attachment disorders that you might see. So there's reactive attachment disorder that you might see. It's where children might have a difficulty kind of getting comfort or seeking out comfort from adults or showing any response when comfort is given. They might even have social disinhibited engagement disorder, where they're looking like they're really easy to get to know people that they don't know. So the unknown people and random strangers, they're easy to talk to them, but they really can't form those meaningful attachments due to those socially disinhibited behaviors. There's also a lot of kind of acute stress disorder or post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms that you might see, where there's a lot of reoccurring recollections of the trauma for children and avoidance of stimuli that remind them of the trauma. They might even have those increased arousal symptoms. And then also a lot of times, more often than not, children survivors are either labeled as or misdiagnosed as kind of the bad child a lot of times, either in the classroom or even at home, to seeing symptoms of ADD and ADHD and or behavioral problems either at home or in the classroom, as well as those mental health diagnoses, which might actually just really be those trauma reactions that the children are having. So I just really wanted to touch on some of the more difficulties and kind of those behaviors you might see and things to look for that might be kind of changing for young children that can be kind of those warning signs to look for, especially if it is a peer-on-peer sexual assault that has gone on. Sometimes it's just looking more for those warning signs, which is really important. And I think it's the last thing I just want to touch on is just remembering that trauma is one's perception, meaning that every individual is going to label, assign kind of a meaning to, and is disrupted physically and psychologically by these traumatic events in many different ways. And that trauma is really a result from an event or series of events or like a set of circumstances that is experienced by an individual as physically or emotionally harmful and life-threatening, and that those traumas often lead to many lasting adverse effects on individuals. So, such as an individual's functioning either through mental, physical, social, emotional, and or spiritual well-being. And some of these can be seen as those really challenging behaviors coming up for these kids.
It's a really good point, Danielle, and how it's, you know, it all goes back to trauma, and that so many of the behaviors that we see or that adults or caregivers see as challenging behavior or concerning behavior may be related to trauma or something that happened. And, you know, all the different warning signs that you all are talking about, or changes in behaviors, it's like anything that makes a parent or a caregiver concerned, like something's going on with this kid, would be enough to warrant like really looking at and paying attention to what is underneath this. You know, why is the child acting this way? What is up with this change that I've noticed? And, you know, just really not dismissing it, but tuning in, you know, really getting to know and becoming attuned to what is happening and what could this really be about. Yeah, go ahead. Jean, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback on some of the things that Danielle said too, because when we see some of these behaviors, you know, so we have to remember that when, you know, a child is dealing with something traumatic, you know, specifically like sexual abuse, their little systems are flooded with cortisol. You know, there are physiological impacts on the brain, which also impact their development, right? And it can look like learning disabilities. It can look like anxiety because they're hyper aroused all the time, right? So just to keep that kind of stuff in mind too. We may see a lot of non-suicidal self-injurious behaviors, which can be cutting, which a lot of young folks do. But, you know, particularly in boys, we might see a lot of high-risk behaviors, like, you know, things with like motorcycles and like, you know, other high-risk sports, and they're really pushing the limits. That can often be a warning sign as well. So just some other things to keep in mind when we're looking at our kids.
And I just wanted to mention that oftentimes children don't have the words to explain what happened to them. It
Right.
felt good. They feel it's their fault. They
Yes.
don't want to talk about it because they think they're going to get in trouble. Heaven forbid they tell mom and dad because they'll be upset at them.
Mm-hmm.
And so
they just don't know that there's anything wrong, you know, like they're just so vulnerable that if this is a person who's saying like, this is what people who love each other do, and this is normal, right, and then they just don't even know that there's anything wrong with what's happening. They don't see it as abuse or trauma.
Or
and
the perpetrator says,
often,
don't tell,
yes,
or I'll hurt
right,
your mom, or there's
yes,
a terrible thing that's going to happen if they disclose.
Yes.
That can be scary for kids. So again,
Yep.
having a conversation, giving kids the words, so important.
Yeah, that's part of creating these environments where it's not going to happen, right? Because if kids have the language and they feel comfortable to communicate and they have open communication with the people around them, then it's going to create an atmosphere where, you know, people are not going to become victims because everyone is aware, you know, and those who would abuse, they can see that. And so they're not going to target those children. I see the time is we're getting to, it's 7:12, and I haven't seen any comments or questions in the chat, but Sue, I don't know if you have received any directly, or if anybody has any questions, any of our viewers or listeners who have tuned in.
I haven't received any, but I do have a slide. When we're totally done, I'd like to share so that people viewing this in the future, the taped version, will have resource numbers. I've got numbers for Children's Cove Independence House and Cape Cod Children's Place. Are there any other numbers that folks would like posted? You can just put them in the chat for me, and I'll have them on the slide for sharing at the end.
Oh, that would be great. Thank you, Sue. We appreciate that. All right. Well, if there are no questions, I guess I would like to just thank you all. This has been an extremely worthwhile conversation and so much valuable information. And yes, we will be sharing this with other groups in the future. With that, if I can turn it back over to Chris Morin from Independence House to share a little bit more information on what's going on with the laws and the legislature around this prevention stuff.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody, for, as Michael has said, a really powerful panel and information. And, you know, it's disappointing that we haven't had a lot of people join us, but again, that's why we want to make it available. As we've said over and over again in the different responses, silence keeps this going. Silence keeps abuse going. And so the more we can talk about it and make it a normal conversation, the better. So what I wanted to show everybody, I'm going to pull it up on the screen, the Enough Abuse campaign headed by Jetta Bernier, has a really great website for resources and action steps and such like that. But one of the things we want to just pinpoint tonight is this prevention package. There is several laws going through to pass through Massachusetts, become law that would really protect children in the schools and in youth serving organizations. So hopefully this will, yeah, good. So I'm just going to pull this website up. If you haven't seen it, I strongly recommend that you use this website for lots of resources. So over here on the left is Pass the Prevention Package. And that is what we're talking about. I'm going to just scroll down a little bit. When you're going to click on here to take action, and it brings you to a page where a letter is already written, and you can just fill the form out and send it to your senator and your representative. There are 3 major areas that this package includes. It requires that education about child sexual abuse prevention is available for all schools and youth serving organizations, and that they adopt an abuse prevention policy. A second focus is strengthening the screening of applicants for positions in schools to identify any past sexual misconduct, to prohibit the aiding and abetting of a school employee engaged in such conduct with a student to secure a position in another school. So we've seen that happen throughout in our culture, where institutions, we could say the church, and in schools do not pass on this information. So one sexual predator is then in another school or church or whatever. And the third section is to prohibit sexual misconduct by a person in a position of authority or trust, that over a minor, and prohibit the age of consent from being used as a defense for child sexual abuse. The age of consent in Massachusetts is 16. And when a 16-year-old is involved with somebody, I think Jacob mentioned, right? People in power, but a teacher, a minister, a coach, they all have power over children. And so even though the age of consent is in 16 in Massachusetts, this law is addressing that so that it's not used as a defense. So that's just the highlights for that. And I'm going to bring it back. Also, on the webpage, up top, there's all the different places, right? You can find information. And so this is the individuals, and down here is a bookshelf. So several of you mentioned certain books. to make it easier for parents to introduce the subject. As I think Jacob said again, you don't have to do a deep dive right away about abuse, but internet safety, the 10 conversations. You can sign up for that, and there's the emails that engage you in different topics. And then one of the action steps is the pledge to prevent. And so it's a series of ways you can get involved. I can't, okay, here. And so, see, they have all these different levels, right? Champion, prevention learner, prevention influencer. We're all at different places and stages of learning about this subject matter and bringing it to, language to it. So they have these different areas where you can join and be involved in the prevention of children. But sometimes it's just a very simple start. Just take your picture with your hand up. That's our logo, the hand up with the prevention. So again, I'm just showing you parts of this website that are important and getting people involved. Okay, so it would be wonderful. I'm trying to get out of this. Well, I'll just stop sharing. And what we would hope you would do is tell friends, get on the website and look at it, but tell friends about this prevention package. It's extremely important. For Massachusetts is one of the few states that do not have any kind of legislation around this prevention work. I guess I forgot to mention on the website, Jetta Bernier and staff created this curriculum where it's online, it's an hour, it's very user-friendly, but it is a prevention piece, and it's about the signs of abuse and everything we talked about. And so that curriculum is offered to schools. I believe there's a purchase price to it, but that their employees can take that at their own time. And like I said, it's just an hour. And the feedback on that is that it's a very, very doable task. It's very helpful. And it just explains the signs and explains what you can do. So we just really like to promote this website. So having said all that, any questions?
You just jogged my mind too about when you said the internet being such an unsafe place for children, and we can't highlight that enough. We do have Tammy Bernardi, who's a trainer from the Children's Trust, presenting a program called Technicool, Keeping Kids Safe on the Internet. It's where predators go to look for children, especially teenagers. I can't tell you how many kids I've worked with in the past who get wrapped up in social media, and these predators find them and lure them into all kinds of things they never knew about that they could really be harm's way from. So this is a great program, and it'll be on Zoom for professionals as well as families, professional development opportunity too. So it's a call and we can do the Zoom link.
Carol, did you say that she gives those programs to children too, or youth?
This is for adults. This is a parent program specifically to teach parents how to keep their kids safe on the internet. All the things that they can do to prevent them from finding these things, or even to have the knowledge that they exist.
Even in the gaming on the, so many of our kids are playing internet gaming and talking with people all over the place, right? And these predators, they know how to reach out to these kids and how to lure them in and give them gifts and things like that in some of these internet games. And even sites that, and Jacob, you can probably speak to this, more than I can, but sites that people think are safe, like, the Minnie Mouse Clubhouse or Mickey Mouse Clubhouse and Nickelodeon and, you know, back when I worked a lot more with Children's Code than I do now, I mean, those were always concerns because ABC mouse, right? You'd assume that those are safe places, but they're not necessarily, because predators know how to go in there and find these kids. It's very scary.
And inviting to pop in at 7 at 7 p.m. and I'll give you a great way to make some great cash fast.
That's
and
right. That's right.
Teenagers in, and they don't know what they're doing, and suddenly they're in all kinds of sexual situations they never thought possible.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Beverly, I just want to add one thing also. Sorry, Jacob, did you want to address something around the internet?
Yeah, I was going to say just a couple of quick things. Yeah, and to Jean's point as well is, you know, it is those places that's gaming. That's a really huge place where that stuff's hitting right now. Social media, privacy settings. On our website, we actually launched a online safety conversation for parents to have with kids, and specific dialogues and tools. And we have something that we call the pledge, which is to help with parents and kids creating conversations around online safety and what are the agreements and rules for the usage of internet enabled devices at home, specifically because we've seen such a rise in the increase of online sexual exploitation cases. And it's actually, you know, sad that we're talking about it, but a news article alert that came to me is that in California, there was just an arrest made of one individual who has victimized at least 80 children through online enticement, through gaming and everything, kids age 6 to 12. So this is a huge issue, and online safety is another part of safety that we need to be discussing with children.
So I just want to add before we end, Mass Kids, Massachusetts Citizens for Children, and Jetta Bernier is trying to be in the forefront of doing of this legislation around schools having to provide child sexual abuse training, not only to staff and teachers, but also to students. And in that realm, in 2019, I was hired as a consultant with Mass Kids, and I went to Vermont to Med Child Vermont to be trained in the Healthy Relationships curriculum, which is up to, I think it's preschool up to 6th grade. And it's a whole curriculum. It's really good. And, you know, we hope to be, Mass Kids hopes to be rolling that out. Michael and I are the only 2 master trainers in the state, besides Jetta Bernier, to offer the Enough Abuse curriculum, the full curriculum, to people who want to be able to train other people in that curriculum and bring it to their, you know, their book club or their church or their PTA. And so keep that in mind. We're willing to come free of charge to your organization and do trainings, or if you have a book club, or like I said, a church group that you think would benefit, we'd be happy to come and talk about the curriculum. It's in 6 parts, and so it's very easy to manipulate. And if you want an hour, or if you wanted 2 hours, we can create those out of the materials that Mass Kids provides for us with the Enough Abuse campaign.
Okay.
Right. I think, Susan, if you could put that slide up with the contact information for folks, that would be great. There it is. So thank you again to Carol Biondi from Cape Cod Children's Place, Jacob Stapleton from Children's Cove, Jean Calvert from the Massachusetts Department of Mental Health, and Danny Palat from Independence House. There you can see the information on how to get in touch. And thank you all for being here tonight and for all that you're doing to help create child-safe environments.